Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Live, and we are excited to be joined by Steve Daly, who is the CEO of Instructure. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Welcome to the best month of the year, I think, October.
Oh, is that right? You love October, huh?
I do.
It's your birthday?
Nope. But ordinarily,
Anniversary?
No. College football. The leaves are changing. Perfect weather, hunting. And
there you go.
Christmas is right around the corner. So
Okay, nice.
that's my opinion, at least. Okay, so you appreciate you being here. You left Ivante after a long tenure there, and you said cheers to 2020 as you left.
Yes, I did. If only I'd known, right?
Little did you know.
Yeah.
'Cause you could have said boo to 2020, right? But that's not the optimistic way of looking at things. So you've experienced an interesting year. You were going to retire, correct?
Yep, that's right.
And now we're sitting here interviewing you as the CEO of Instructure. So kind of go over the process of that. How did you land at Instructure? Why? And what were the steps to get you there?
Yeah, so you're right. I was convinced. I may have been the only person convinced that I was actually retired. My family, I guess, had an over/under of 3 months on me. I made it to 6, so I won. But we, as I got into the end of last year, it was pretty clear. I was getting burnt out. I had been doing that job for 13 years. Had taken what was Landesk and now Ivante from a $90 million business to a $500 million business. We'd been through 2 ownership changes, and I was just wiped out. And so my goal was I'm done. I'm gonna make up for some of the lost time with my family and spend some time with my kids, and I did. I had a chance to do that, and it was good. And it was interesting because the Instructure was in the process of going private, and so it was probably February. So I'd been retired for 6 weeks or maybe 4 weeks, and the new owners, Thoma Bravo, called up and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to be on the board because we're going to take them private, and you've got experience, our model, you can coach with the CEO." And so I said, great. And so I went to breakfast with the CEO and spent a bunch of time with the team, helping them and kind of coaching them through. And then they called me up about a month later and said, "Hey," so this was probably early March, and they said, "Hey, CEO is not going to go forward with the company. How would you like to come run it?" My answer was again no. I said, "Look, I'm retired. I'm burnt out." And I got a call from Orlando Bravo at Thoma Bravo, and he's like, "Come on, we need to do this deal. We like to back somebody we know." And I said no again. And so they started a search, and we went through a couple board meetings, and I really got excited about the mission. Instructure sells, Canvas, which is a learning management system, and what we were starting to see, starting March, April timeframe, was a lot of schools that hadn't had that technology and hadn't been able to kind of deliver learning outside of a traditional classroom were starting to adopt it. And so I got excited, and I will admit that coronavirus really put a damper on my retirement, right? Yeah. I used to love being able to go to Ace Hardware, right, and be the only guy walking around in the aisles, and then I couldn't even do that. So I think a combination of it was a great opportunity. All my projects got done, got a little bored. It's time to go back to work.
Gotcha. Yeah, if I've ever retired, I'm going to spend a lot of time at Ace because I enjoy it as well.
That's exactly right.
I go in there and don't buy stuff. I just like the smell.
Just wander in the hall, and exactly. And nobody in there at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday.
It's a good place. All of them are great. All right, so you were brought in to manage the next phase of growth for Instructure, which is a long-tenured Silicon Slopes company. What does that mean, right? We could probably talk for hours, but how are you looking at that?
Yeah. One of the other reasons I went back is because I felt like a lot of my skill sets, a lot of the things I learned taking Landesk from $100 million to 500, I could apply. And there are a lot of challenges when you try to scale a business like that. And so, for me, what that means is we've got to get pretty disciplined about how we run a business. We can't just keep throwing people at problems because it just doesn't scale. So how do we create a structure that allows us to scale? How do we create a leadership organization that knows how to empower a team rather than doing all the work themselves? So there's a number of things, and then it's about focus and how do we focus on the right strategy, the right products, the right routes to market to be successful. So all of those things are going to come together within our strategy for Instructure. But the reality is there's an opportunity. There's been a change in education. There's been, people have started to recognize that just like we have in the work environment, right? We don't have to be here every day. And that's going to provide a lot of opportunity for access for those that can't come to a traditional classroom environment. And the LMS is going to be kind of the center of that kind of revolution in education. And so it's a platform to be able to build a lot of things off. So that's what it means, is we're going to create that platform and bring the industry around the learning management system and around Canvas.
So you had a little bit of a runway, which is a little bit of an advantage, but what you just described for you is that in a notebook, is it a whiteboard? Like, because you're going to kind of silo what you just described. How do you kind of structure your day to tackle those various things?
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mean as far as how do I work with the team and how do we attack that? It's been interesting and challenging. I've never started a job as a new CEO in this virtual sort of environment. And there's some advantages. So I've probably met with 150 customers. I've met with hundreds of employees over Zoom calls, which wouldn't have been the accepted way. I would have gone and visited the customers in the past. So there are some advantages to doing that. But working with the team, we go into the office once a week. And so when we're going to do staff meeting, we come in, we socially distance, we wear masks, but just getting that face-to-face and the ability to kind of just hash things out on a whiteboard, I don't think you can replace that. As cool as the technology is, there's something about that back and forth that happens spontaneously that you don't get in a video conference.
Yeah. Obviously, there's like body language that you're missing out on, and
oh yeah.
We were talking before, you might have a funny joke and you get talked over and it was never heard, and that's a tragedy.
That's right. A wasted joke. It's funny because I've met so many of the employees, and we were doing some recording for our user conference that's coming up, and everybody said, I didn't realize you were so tall, because everybody just seen me from here up, right? And so you just miss that personal.
Yeah. So you've got an interesting experience at Avante working on kind of both sides with the private equity, Thoma Bravo and Clear Lake. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of people, that's a murky industry, and they don't quite understand how private equity works with, in this case, enterprise software and things like that. So kind of give us a rundown of how those relationships work and why it's advantageous for you in the past.
Yeah. So I think private equity fills a need in the market for companies, particularly like Instructure, that kind of hit a wall in their growth, for a variety of reasons, don't know how to create a profitable business for whatever reason, and so I think there's a need in the market. Venture fills a very specific need in getting these things started and just getting them growing like crazy, getting market share. But now what do you do with that market share? Private equity, I think, is ideally situated in this market. And I think that's why there's so much success with private equity right now, because there are a lot of companies that have started up and then have kind of hit that wall. So, but they're driven by a lot of the same things. It's about, how do we get a return on our investment? Private equity is about de-risking that investment. So, most of the business models, there's growth private equity and there's value private equity, but most of them really require the management teams to focus on profitability and how do we get much more profitable. We'll go from we'll go at Instructure from a kind of break-even business, growing kind of high double-digit, teens, and this year we've got, we're seeing a lot of success. We'll probably grow at almost 40% this year, but we'll be doing it at 40% margin on the business, right? Profit margin. And so the great thing about working with private equity is they've seen it all. And so my experience was I learned a ton as a CEO working with Thoma Bravo. They taught me a lot about how do you run a profitable, well-run business. And I think that's the niche they kind of pull out in the investment community.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, right? Because I imagine, before you're interacting with them after a year or two and you've got to present, hey, here's our margins or here's this or that, they can be unforgiving as well.
They can, and there are some really just nasty private equity firms out right there, and they just come in and they just cut, and so you've got to be very careful about who you work with. My experience with Thoma Bravo has been fantastic. This is my second tour of duty with them, so that's kind of my endorsement of them. But you really have to be on top of the business. You really have to understand the business. Be very data driven. There's not a lot of tolerance for somebody that tries to get up and just position with a lot of words. If the data doesn't show the trends, you're never going to get through that board meeting without just getting filleted, right? And so, and these guys are, the smartest guys in the room. They are really, they're cream of the crop when it comes to investors. And so, it can be stressful. And if you don't have if you're not with the right firm, it can be just brutal.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a position where the data is okay but not great, but you've got this gut instinct or this intuition that it will be better in 6 months or even 3 or 4 years? And have you ever dug your heels in and gone to bat for your gut feeling? Yeah.
I've got a good example, a bad example. My bad example was we were doing an acquisition, and it was a pretty early stage company. We like to buy companies that have proven product market fit and have some revenue and some growth. This was pretty early stage, and the board came back and said, we don't think you should do this. And I said, we absolutely have to do it, and this is why. And so they let us do it, and it ended up being a really crappy acquisition. So that's where my gut told me something, and I wasn't right. But at the same time, I've had examples of where we've had to invest in product, and my gut told me it was the right investment to do, and so we went ahead with it. We were at Advanti, and we needed to transition from a on-prem software to cloud-based, and so we put a lot of development around cloud, and it was painful, right? It was every board meeting, them looking at that big number and just saying, I don't think you're doing the right thing, Steve, but we'll go ahead and support you, and right? And so it was, bad about the head. It ended up paying off, but and they're not unreasonable. Again, if you get the right partner there.
True. So team dynamics are always something that's interesting. Small teams, big teams, small governments, big governments. You've got an interesting team dynamic, right? You're the new kid in school, new kid in the company, but you're also the boss. So what are some of the strategies that you're going to use or have used with your employees and your stakeholders to make it as smooth as possible?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I've had this has been a process I've gone through 2 or 3 times in my career. For me, the most important thing when you come into a new job like that, and what I do is I just let everybody know, look, I'm on a listening tour. right? The next 30 days, I am just going to meet with as many people as possible, customers and employees, and I just want you to tell me what's working, why do you love it here at Instructure, and what do you hate about it, and what do we need to fix, and if you were me, what would you focus on? And that engenders, I think, a lot of trust because it's showing that, I don't think I have all the answers. I got to figure out what the problems are before we can come up with the answers together. And then spending time with the new management team. And I'll do that. We come into the office once a week for our staff meeting as a way to kind of create that cohesion with the team going forward. And then I'll publish, when I first start, I've done this a couple times on new CEO jobs, is I publish the daily news. And every Friday, I just kind of list out, these are the things I'm hearing, these are the things, here's my thoughts on the things I'm hearing, and create a level of transparency, because everybody believe, the very first all-hands meeting we did at Instructure, one of the questions was, how can we trust you? Right? And it's a great question, and I know that they had some, I was the third CEO in a year and a half, and so there was some distrust, but I think that's in a lot of people's mind is how can I trust you to do that? So, and then on the other hand, I went into a startup and there was 3 people, they were trying to get funding, and they couldn't get the funding, so one of the investors called me up and said, hey, if you'll run this company, I think I can get my investors to fund it. Because a couple of engineers, they said, we need somebody with some business sense. And so why don't you go talk to him? And I said, okay, I'll do that. This was back V-Spring Capital days. And so he said, okay, but go talk to him tonight because you need to come present to my partners tomorrow. So I walk in, and here's a team that's been working their butts off to come up with a prototype, and they feel really good about it. They've pitched it. They didn't get the funding, and now they're told, you got to bring this guy on as your CEO. And they were not happy, right? I walked in, and they're all there. And one of them even said, look, just so you know, you're only here because the funding comes with you, and if this doesn't work out, you're out. Right, and so that was a little more hostile of a starting point, but again, it was focused on just learning from them. And once they saw that there was value that I could add that they didn't have, a couple of them became friends, really close friends, and so I think it's really about that communication, and I think that's what's hard with COVID, right? Is getting that face-to-face and being able to be with somebody so that they can learn to trust you.
Yeah, it's another layer of complication, to say the least. Yeah, so that, 2 great examples. One, you're a little bit hostile and you got shoved in the locker, and then the other one, you're too big to do it
exactly
at that
right.
point. But as we mentioned before, you were on the board before of Instructure. Now you interact with the board in a different way. How does a CEO interact with a board, similar to the size of your board, the size of your company? What are a few kind of things that people might not understand about how that functions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's interesting because there's, I've been on management teams of public companies, and the board functions a lot differently than a private company. And in the case of a public company board, it's very governance-based, and it's very kind of arm's length. But with the private companies that I've worked with, and Instructure included, the key is in my mind is to treat them as partners, right? We're all in the boat together. They want the same thing that I want, which is to be successful, and so I've seen some CEOs kind of approach it like the board's scared of me, right? Because I'm just, I just go in and I dominate them. I've never found that to work long term. Most of the CEOs kind of get bounced after a while in those types of situations. So it's really about collaboration, and boards hate to be surprised. So anytime there's a whiff of bad news, right? I'm picking up the phone, talking to our chairman, saying, hey, this is what's going on. I don't know if it's going to be a bad thing or not, but I wanted to give you the heads up. When I was at Avanti, we had somebody stealing from us, and we found out they'd stolen almost $1 million. And so I was in Singapore at the time, so I picked up the phone and called our chairman and said, "Hey, here's what I'm finding." So by the time it kind of rose to the board level, the anger, fear, uncertainty, all that was taken out of it because they'd had time to process. So I think that level of communication and collaboration with the board has been one of my keys of success.
So you're sitting at your desk and your office line is a board member calling and your cell phone's your wife. Which one do you answer?
I'll tell you, there was a time in my career where the board member always won. I've kind of, part of my retirement was also a bit of self-awareness about where I put my priorities. So now it would be my wife. And part of the reason I went back to work is because the chairman of the board, we had some conversations about balance and things like that, and he's fully supportive of that. And so I'm in a situation where I feel like I can live an integrated life now. I don't have to be 100% work and then everything else takes a back seat, and that's super empowering. And so I would pick up the phone for my wife.
Okay.
I think she's going to be watching too. So
it's probably recorded.
Yeah. So.
The truth meter. All right, so 2020 for a lot of people in a lot of industries will actually be good for the bottom line. You've indicated that it's a good year as far as sales and margins. So how quickly are you guys moving in 2020 compared to what you might have done in a previous year as far as let's try this, let's try to fill that gap real quick? And what are your plans for 2021?
Yeah, and for us, the big impetus was all these schools had to go, remote, and particularly higher ed has been pretty engaged in remote learning for a long time, but K-12 in this country has not. It's always been viewed, a learning management system has been viewed as a nice to have, and so. April came and everybody freaked, right? And so we had the last 2 quarters have been the 2 best quarters in the history of the company. But that's because people were scrambling to try to get something in place for fall start. Our usage is up almost 6 times from what a normal usage of our platform is. We were like the number 15th most trafficked website in the U.S. During our fall start. And so really what we focused on is we basically hunkered down. When this started to happen, we said, okay, we're going to put our roadmap on hold. Everything is going to be focused on making sure that the platform is stable up, that we don't have any downtime. You can imagine, April, you're going into finals. I was talking to UC Berkeley is one of our customers. They were freaking out. Right? They were like, if this platform goes down during finals week, we are dead in the water. And so are you, Instructure, right? So we really hunkered down, and then from that perspective, we, now the challenge is a different one, in that we've grown a ton, we've got to make more investments. The question is, where is the right place to place those bets? Because it gets really easy when you get in a situation of abundance to just want to do everything. Right, and I'm going to put a chip on every number on the roulette wheel, and you'll lose. You end up losing money. And so now our challenge is figuring out where do we place a stack of chips, right? Where are we going to make those bets? And we believe there are some clear winners in that space, and that's really how we're focusing the organization. Boom, let's go.
Yeah. I don't recall what I used. I graduated from my MBA program in 2011, but the majority of Utah schools use Canvas.
Use
correct?
Canvas, that's right. Yeah.
So
In fact, the state. In fact, Utah, I think, was ahead of the rest of the country. There's now 13 or 14 states that do it this way, but Utah was the first to say, look, we're going to fund this from the state for K-20, and we're going to buy it for the schools so they don't have to worry about budget every year, and then let them use it. And so, so every school within the Utah Education Network is licensed to use Canvas.
Okay, great. So Texas, New York, Florida, and California would be good if that happened for you guys.
That's right.
And I guess if the platform would have gone down, obviously it didn't and never will, but like BYU and University of Utah could show up at your door or your office and
No, they can, and they have. I've gotten, and part of the challenge is we've got a network of teachers in K-12 that have never used an LMS, right? And all of a sudden, I really feel for the teachers because they're being thrown into this situation where they're used to teaching in an in-classroom, right? They got their lesson plans, they've done this for years, and now all of a sudden, you can't just say, I'm just going to put a video camera up and do this, remotely. You really have to change the pedagogy of how you deliver those lessons, and so they're really just tapped out. So I've gotten some hate mail, about people just saying this is too hard. It's I'm stressed, and your platform isn't helping me at all. And so it's been hard.
Yeah, they're in a bind, if they're not technically proficient, or again, they're just like, great, this is one more thing.
That's
I don't
exactly
get paid a lot.
No, exactly.
I've got to learn this. But obviously teachers don't make enough, but there's no rules that parents can't slip them $100 bill every once in a while, right? Like, I hope everyone is compensating the teachers a bit more.
Yeah.
Here's a gift certificate. All right, so if I were to say somebody was a awesome cowboy in the Badlands, New York Police Commissioner, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Navy, a Rough Rider war hero, Governor of New York, Vice President of the United States, President of the United States, Nobel Prize winner, National Forest champion and creator, Panama Canal, way awesome hunter, got shot campaigning and finished his speech, and was a good dad, who would that be?
That would be my hero, Teddy Roosevelt.
Joint hero.
Joint hero, yep.
I love him.
Yeah.
And that list could probably go on.
Keep going, yeah.
So, you've been in a leadership position for a long time, and you've probably read dozens of books and interacted with dozens of people that are great leaders, but what differentiates Teddy Roosevelt for you, and how do you try to mimic some of his traits and how you lead?
Yeah, there's a couple things I really love about Teddy Roosevelt. One is just an amazingly curious mind, right? The guy was so well read. We were talking earlier, he writes a book about naval history, right? He was, a very expansive mind. And and I think he was blessed, he was with a gift of intelligence, memory and those types of things, but he really took that talent and just built it to the max. And then he to me, he embodied grit. He was the one that, there's so much, his growing up, he was sickly, and he lost his wife and his daughter, and just had to face a lot of really hard trials, and he just kind of, at one point he went to the Badlands, right, to find his, his center, but he really, he epitomizes grit, and his quote, "The man in the arena," I have on my wall, because that to me is, epitomizes whenever I'm feeling down, or I'm feeling like this isn't working for me. He said that last line in that quote where, at least you're not among the cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat, right? And we're not just playing the safe, that we're doing stuff that matters, and so sometimes it's going to suck, and but that's okay too.
Yeah, agree. Amazing guy, and that man in the arena, that wasn't a PR agency, and it didn't take 10 hours to write. That was just free flowing,
right?
And he's got dozens of awesome quotes like that. How do you think, with 2020, Teddy Roosevelt would kind of manage, whether he was the president or just an advisor? Because he was also, he spoke 4 or 5 different languages. When he wasn't president, the other presidents would call on him to go be the emissaries in Europe and things like that. How do you think you would manage today if we just dropped him in with no guidance?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because my impression would be that he would, he would definitely step up to the leadership role, right? And he would be, he wouldn't care what the politics are about it. He would do what he thinks is right. But I think the thing that I really liked about him, right, he negotiated the whole Panama Canal, right? He was a great statesman. So I believe, his style would be, this is what we're doing. We're going to stop arguing about it. We're going to stop politicizing it. This is it. But he would work to get the support for that, and he just had a gift for that I'm not sure our politicians nowadays possess.
Yeah, and we could go on for hours with this, but one of the other things that kind of set him apart, and a few other presidents of that era, but just the relationships.
Yeah.
And that he'd maintain over decades and decades, and it was usually, tea and, kind of this upper echelon aristocratic society that he came from, but he could go as low as the, Rough Riders but then hundreds of thousands of letters and heartfelt, right? Like, it took a lot of time to communicate with your friends back then.
Yeah.
And now we've got instant communication, and a lot of the times we don't utilize it
nearly
as well. But that was a big advantage for him is, oh, look at this problem. Oh, I have 5 genuine friends, genuine relationships that I can call on. I don't have to fake it. And again, that just takes work. Most people might not be willing to manage friendships in that capacity, but he was.
I think you're right. And for me, that's been one of the keys to success. As I've, every role I've taken has felt like can I do it? Right. I've always had those moments of self-doubt to say, I don't know if I can do this. And so, but I've had some great mentors. I had our chairman of the board at Avanti. At one point he said, "Look, Steve, your job as CEO is you've got to create space for you to think, because this is what we need from you, right?" And I was so busy doing. Likewise, I had a CEO that I worked for when Landesk was part of Avocent, and I went into a board meeting and I was presenting, and I just did crappy. I just sucked. And we came out of that, and he took me into his office and he said, "Look, you can't fix everything that needs to be fixed at Landesk on your own. You have got to learn how to leverage your team better, because you'll have more board meetings like that if you don't do that." And so, it's those people that you can go to, you can rely on in your life that can help you navigate some of those things. And sometimes, I've tried coaching with a lot of different people, and a lot of times people aren't open. They'll ask it, but when it comes right down to it, not open to that coaching. And so I think being coachable is one of those things. And being willing to reach out, like Teddy Roosevelt, right? Write a letter and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. What's your advice?"
Yep.
What a stud he was.
So amazing. Yeah, easy to say, tough to do, and he always walked the talk. And we didn't even bring up that he was a fairly aged man and just decided to go explore the Amazon.
Oh, I know.
He has a river named after him because he and his Brazilian counterpart discovered it.
Yeah.
A normal man would die 1,000 times on that journey.
Yeah.
A big chunk of the animals in the Smithsonian, were his, donated, and so really cool. Well, really much appreciate you being here, and congrats on the new role. And
thank you.
Congrats on a successful 2020 so far, and we'll look forward to your guys' continued success, and appreciate you being a part of Silicon Slopes.
Yeah, thank you much.